Winter came upon the Hurtgen forest fast. Blistering cold mixed with driving slush threatened to stall even the best-equipped army. Hunkered down behind the root ball of a massive pine, Staff Sergeant Frank Delaney knew they were far from properly kitted. 3 days ago, Command sent the entire company as reinforcements. 3 days ago, there were 156 living, breathing men headed for glory. 3 days ago, Jerry's getting lucky with this fucking shit. Eh, Sarge? Bill muttered. William Haskins, a man of many harsh truths, Frank thought, as the downpour began and he was shaken from thought. For Chrissick, now it rains. Can't believe this shit. Can it, Bill? And Frank will do. The boys call you Sarge anyways, Frank shot back. Looking out over the field, he knew they couldn't stay here much longer. Yay, can it, Billy? Mocked Corporal Joseph Joe Marchetti. Don't antagonize, retorted Bobby. Sarge, we're all just cold and wet. This loud mouth gotta get his in sometime. Cut him some slack. The helm of argument grew as Frank pondered once more of their predicament. No gunfire for hours. Course that didn't mean squat in a hell hole like this. Germans were liable to be anywhere. He scanned the territory again. If they were lucky, the Krauts were all holed somewhere warm and they could sneak away and regroup. As the squabble threatened to exceed acceptable volume, Frank made his choice. Enough, we are. Moving. Pack up, get ready to roll in 5. Frank barked. Christ's sake indeed, he thought, as they stuffed their tarps in bags and shouldered their packs. He looked over the men. The only other for that made it out of the deuce and a half before it lit up like a rocket. Bill stuck to him like stink on shit, so of course he made it. Joe and Bobby were almost inseparable as well. The only outlier was Private Tommy O'Hara. Just got to the CP 4 days ago, their newest addition. 19 and barely out of diapers. That's what Bill said about him. Frank thought they all were. None of them were older than 23. In 3 minutes, they were all ready. Company record, Frank thought. Hell, there was no one else. Not anymore. He reckoned they were the only scrape of big company left. Listen here, I'm only saying it once. Stay low, watch each other's backs, and stop the chatter. Steadily, they slogged through the mud and branches. The thicker forest was just a couple dozen feet away from the fallen oak, giving them cover the whole way. Frank kept his eyes peeled. Bill muttered something about the mud sucking the life out of him, and Tommy stumbled, the rough leather of his boots catching on some fallen branches. He cursed as if he'd just been shot. Easy, O'Hara, keep it quiet, Frank said as he helped the boy steady himself. The next hour was much of the same. They crept low and slow through the forest, heeding every noise as if it was a full-on assault. Frank once again slipped into the depths of his mind. These men depended on him. Bill could make choices, but he was too harsh. Joe couldn't shut his smart mouth if his own mother begged him. Bobby was shaky as a leaf and far too jumpy. O'Hara. No to new. Frank had to be the one. As the weight of choice settled on his mind, something caught his eye. Stop, Frank said in a whisper. They slid into a defensive posture and scanned ahead. Watch a god, Frank, Bill said, shouldering his Garand, finger easing to the trigger. Bunker, 3 o'clock. The iron door ahead was mostly buried, leaves piling up in wet rot and sludge. Frank didn't like this. They were too few. No, he didn't like it at all. Well, Billy, go on over and give Em a knock. Maybe they'll invite us in to dry our socks. Could even have some of that good Kraut sausage you love so much. Joe, we make it out of here. I'll kill you myself, Bill said before returning his attention to Frank. Tighten up. Bill, this place looks wrong. Let's be careful. Joe Bobby set up behind something, get the bar positioned. O'Hara, watch and learn. The rain had turned to sleet, and they were all bad off. Frank knew they had to get under something and quick. If they could clear this, maybe it would work long enough to figure something else out. As Frank and Bill moved to the door, boots searching for purchase in the black mud, The scent of blood hit them square on the nose. Jesus, Frank? They keeping buckets of guts in there? Shut it, Bill. Frank knew he was nervous, but God, did he get under his skin. Frank pressed his ear to the door and listened. Nothing but the steady drip of water echoed back. All right, we knock, he whispered before rapping his knuckles 3 times. There was nothing. No shuffling, no sharp intake of breath. Nothing but the overwhelming smell of rot and blood. He nodded to Bill as they stepped into the black entrance. Tommy O'Hara sat on his haunches, observing just like Frank said too. He watched from behind a boulder as Frank clicked his light on and walked right into the abyss. Bill seemed to hesitate a moment, then followed. Bobby and Joe bickered from a nearby stump. Old married couple, he thought. Tommy was scared shitless. Back home his pa would strip him for using that kind of language. At least here he was treated like a man. Hey, baby face, got any smokes? Joe said from his decaying roost as Tommy pictured a broody hen from back home. Well, Frank treated him like a man, Tommy thought as he dug in his overcoat and fished out a lucky. Going to come get it, Tommy quipped as he held it cupped in his palm. This weather was getting to his core. He thought he may just start shaking and keep on that way till the meat shook right off his bones. Hell kid, oughta slap you, Joe replied, half smiling as he said it. Just as he stood, voices broke the silence. Germans. Bobby hissed through gritted teeth, and lots of them. They were getting closer by the second. Tommy was not ready, even if Bobby and Joe looked it. He felt like running. Hell, he was going to run. Tommy started sliding towards the bunker door, keeping as low as he could. Just as he got within arm's reach, a single shot cracked through the air. The noise shattered his will and he froze. All of a sudden, he was hauled up and dumped inside. Fear shot through him and he inhaled, ready to scream when he saw who it was. Kid, that shit'll get you killed. Joe wheezed as Bobby pushed the rusty door closed behind them. He bristled with anger as he loomed over Tommy. Don't ever freeze when you're getting shot at. Christ, I can't see another kid die. Bobby, can you believe this? Before Bobby could answer, the voices returned. They were just outside the door. See Sindri gangen. Last and see her slockin, said a gruff voice. Idiot! We're Nen Nick train. Dieses lockest verdammt, came the next. A third replied with verflucht. Globst du berhaupt an Argendet was, Frederick? The second voice seemed to get angry and said, Ich habe es gesehen. Jetter der Horoskam, word and I grubben geschickt. Willst du das wirklich riskieren? The first voice returned to say, Our hat wrecked. Was auch immer da drin ist, word sie für uns erledigen. Blockier die TR. As soon as the talking stopped, there were loud bangs on the door. Tommy just knew they were coming through, knew he was done for. Yet, as soon as it had begun, it stopped. The first voice returned, Auf Wiedersehen, Amerikaner, viel Spaß in der Hall. Then, silence. I think. They left. Bobby said in a wet tone. Phyllis, I need a pair of breeches. Think I shit these full. I'm soaked. Tommy wanted to laugh. He wanted to cry too. Before either could happen, he saw a bloom of red steadily spreading from Bobby's chest. Bobby, sit down. He barked as he pulled off his pack and dug for the med kit inside. Oh fuck. Joe hollered as he finally saw what was going on. Bobby slumped against the door and slid to the ground with a gasp. Kraut. Got me? He wheezed as blood pooled on his chest and slid off to the floor. Tommy finally felt the kit and pulled it out. Sweat stung his eyes. Moments thundered like ages as he tore the cap from a morphine syringe and dove to Bobby. A quick thrust. A tight squeeze. The dose delivered. Adrenaline coursed into Tommy as he watched Bobby go slack beneath his hands. Joe put pressure on it. Bobby yelled. He knew Frank said to be quiet, but he couldn't control himself. They worked on him for several minutes. Nothing was stopping the blood. Joe was weeping, but Tommy was stoic for once in his short life. He kept pushing hard. This was fatal, he thought as he saw the blood finally slowing. He looked up and was shocked. He met eyes with Bobby, but there was no one home. They had already begun to gloss over. Footsteps sounded from a set of stairs leading down. Neither man could hear it though, as they clutched to Bobby's corpse. Frank and Bill came back up the bunker steps, their faces pale, bodies tense. They'd gone deeper, knew this wasn't gonna work for shelter. But as they rounded the corner, the sight stopped them cold. Tommy and Joe were huddled over Bobby's body, hands smeared with blood, faces slick with tears. Blood pooled darkly on the floor, dripping from the edge of the doorway. Bobby Frank muttered, voice barely audible. Bill's stomach turned. He gripped the wall to keep from vomiting. Christ, no, Tommy looked up at them, eyes wide, voice trembling. He didn't make it. We tried, Joe let out a ragged sob. I couldn't. Frank swallowed hard, jaw tight. He turned, fists clenched. We need to leave, now. Bill's eyes darted to the walls, to the shadows lingering in the corners. Something down there had followed them, he was certain. The air smelled wrong. Something akin to iron and rot. Blood and sick. It permeated every stitch of clothing, clung to his skin. And now it pressed in on them heavier than before. Tommy's hands were shaking as he straightened. Leave. They got him, Frank. They could still be there, waiting. I can't feel my toes. Can't feel my face. Can't we wait a bit? Frank didn't answer. He knelt, slapping a hand over Bobby's chest one last time, then rose. Doesn't matter. We have to go. A collective shiver ran through the group. Tommy's stomach churned. Joe's breath came quick and shallow. The heavy, warped metal of the door once again taking up the mantle of uncertainty. The kid done good, Frank, Joe said, voice trembling with watery undertones. He tried to save him. Did more than I could. Jesus, Frank, they shot him. And then they talked to each other just on the other side. Planning, scheming, I don't know. But it ain't good. Kid's right, probably waiting to pick us off as we go out. Bill slowly picked up Bobby and moved him aside. Tommy thought he showed more grace than any of them thought he was capable of in that moment. Then he tried to ease the door open. It didn't budge, fellas. I think we got a problem, Bill said as he struggled at the door. After 15 minutes of heaving and pulling, they were all exhausted. The door was steadfast, and nothing moved it an inch. Frank's voice was tight. There's only one way then, down. Deeper. Bill glanced back toward the shadows beneath them, and his gut clenched. God help us, it's not empty down there, boys. Felt like I was being watched the whole time. There's blood everywhere, and we only went down a little ways. Saw cages, chains. Shit, I don't know what happened here, but Jerry left in a hurry. Tommy swallowed hard, vision flickering between fear and disbelief. The bunkers seemed to pulse around them, walls stretching ever so slightly. The air growing damp and sour. Frank looked at Tommy for a long time. Tommy didn't dare break the contact. It gave him strength. Finally, Frank said, listen, we don't have a choice. These bunkers always have more than one entrance. 2 floors down, there's a flooded section to the right, so that's off limits. But it seemed clean. Let's move there and wash up a little. To the left of the water were some lockers, still had some crowd clothing. We'll get bundled up and start looking for a way out. Got it. Wilco, Frank, Bill replied. Tommy and Joe just nodded. They had no choice. With Bobby gone, the only path was forward, into the twisting dread that waited deeper in the bowels of the bunker. As they gathered what they had, shifting shadows and dripping water met them at the mouth of the void. Bill approached the stairs first and gave Frank a curt nod. I'll take point, boss. You got rear? Roger. Frank moved to the back, casting one last glance at Bobby. Had come back for him if they made it out. No one should be left in a place like this. They descended slowly, each step swallowed by the darkness. The air was thick, almost tasting of rust and decay, and apprehension clung to them like a second skin. Faint drips echoed off the walls. and something about the shadows made the hairs on Bill's neck prickle. Soon, they came to a landing, with rooms on either side. Communication hub, stripped clean, Frank said as he urged them to keep moving. The next descent was longer than the previous. At the front, Bill's light began to waver, pulsing faster with each step. After what felt like an eternity, they reached second landing. Just like Frank said, there was an opening that was flooded to the right. It swallowed what little light they had, a black pool that seemed to pulse in the darkness. Joe and Tommy knelt at the edge, scrubbing Bobby's blood from their hands. But no matter how hard they worked, the stains wouldn't lift. "Fellas, we can't linger. Come on, grab what you can," Frank said as he pulled open the door to the lockers behind them. Bill gave a disapproving look and said, "O'Hara, these might be a little big but should do the trick," before tossing Tommy an overcoat and some trousers. "Pull him on and let's get to beating feet. Place gives me the creeps." Tommy and Joe removed their blood and sleet-soaked gear and quickly donned the warm woolen clothing. The relief was instant. With a renewed vigor, they moved forward. Chains dangled, half ripped from anchor points in the wall. There were cages half submerged in the pool, others stacked up along the wall, all empty. The tunnel ahead was black, but as they went forward, the lights overhead began to flicker. They could faintly hear the sound of machines, probably generators, struggling to keep this place alive. "Fuck, I don't like this, Frank," Bill said from up front. "These lights are making my head hoo." He tripped, cutting himself short. Bill hit the ground hard. Frank pushed past him, aiming his weak light at the floor. The beam of light caught something pale. A skeleton lay sprawled across the concrete. Broken bones and marrow stood stark in the flickering light. Tendons and sinews spread here and there. The smell of iron hung heavy in the air. "Mother of God," Joe whispered, looking over Frank's shoulder. What did that?" Bill's stomach dropped. He took a step back and tripped again, landing in a pile of sludge. Tommy's hands trembled. He squinted at the walls. A multitude of gouge and claw marks striped into the concrete stared back at him. Frank swallowed. "Jaw tight. Keep moving. Don't touch anything else. Keep going. It's picked clean. Something ate him." Bill shouted in panic. "Keep moving. Only choice," Frank said, glaring at Bill. "I'll take point." "Stay tight," he said as he clipped his light onto his coat. Frank led the way, gun at the ready. Every step squelched in the sludge bellow. The air was thick down here. A faint scratching came from somewhere ahead. Then it grew closer, almost like brutal fingernails scraping concrete. Bill froze. "Fellas!" Something burst from the darkness, half shrouded in shadow. It lunged for Bill's legs. He stumbled back, yelping as claws tore through cotton and flesh. The thing moved faster than any man could have. Frank shot. His gun's muzzle flash illuminated the creature's face for a heartbeat. Hollow features and slick, jagged teeth lit up like a flare. It shrieked a high gurgling sound that made Tommy's ears ring. "Bill, get that gun up. All three of you, set up a perimeter," Frank belted, the ever-stoic leader. Joe grabbed Tommy's arm, dragging him back as another shadow slithered along the wall, scraping claws across the concrete. Bill kicked at the first creature, rolling to his side. Tommy stumbled, light swinging wildly, catching glimpses of bodies. They were skeletal and sleek. Some were torn up, like they had fed on each other. As soon as they appeared, they were gone. What was that thing? Joe shrieked. His humor was gone. "There's more, just there," Tommy shouted, pointing wildly all around them. His resolve was failing. He wanted his mother. "Tighten up. Cut the chatter and listen. We need to move. This is a death funnel. It's just like Omaha Bill. Don't look at the blood. Just keep moving." They stood in silence. Joe wept while Tommy retched. Bill stood with his back pressed against the wall, jaw slack with confusion. Frank barked. "Move. Keep moving. Don't stop for anything." "Frank, I've seen lots of things, but this takes the cake." "Where are we supposed to go?" Bill said. Before Frank could retort, the tunnel seemed to close around them. Screeches and scratching echoed from all sides. One of the creatures lunged at Tommy, brushing against his shoulder, leaving a thin, slick trail of black ichor. The taste of fear was thick in his mouth. That broke the tension. They ran while the creatures converged just a step behind. Joe was dashing ahead like a madman. He slipped on a slick patch, pitching forward. Before anyone could reach him, one of the creatures lunged from the dark. Its claws tore into his shoulders and its jagged maw snapped down on his neck with a wet, sickening crack. A spray of blood splattered across Bill's face and streaked along Frank's arm as they barreled past. Joe's screaming cut off abruptly. The thing yanked him into the darkness, leaving only a crimson trail behind. Frank gritted his teeth. Push on. They ran ahead a small piece before stumbling into a wider chamber. The tunnel opened into a space that felt almost suspended in time. The air was thick and heavy, but for a fleeting moment, no claws scraped, no shadows lunged. The walls dripped with what looked like red, glistening webbing, stretched and pulsing as if alive. It looked sticky and smelled the same as the rest. Blood. All of that aside, they finally had a moment to breathe. Bill ran a hand along the walls, shivering. What is this stuff? Lou looks like blood. Tommy stammered. All right, come here, boys. I don't know what this is, but we can't give up. Bill, you said yourself that you've seen a lot of things. This is no different. We just have to plan and execute. Textbook war. Point, shoot, reload, repeat. Tommy's stomach nodded, but he took a breath, trying to steel himself. Joe and Bobby didn't die for nothing. Bill said, finally finding his resolve. You've got the skinny of it, boss. We have to get out. CP needs to know. Frank nodded, a look of admiration on his face. He was about to speak when the lights in the chamber shut off. A torrent of clicking claws descended upon them. As snapping maws and shredding claws raced towards them, Tommy and Bill bore witness to true courage as Frank leveled his gun. Tommy and Bill could only watch, frozen in awe. The creatures poured from the tunnel the three of them had just emerged from, so thick that they were tearing through one another. Positioned between the writhing torrent and themselves, Frank stood and opened fire. Chitinous figures fell beneath Frank's onslaught. Black ichor sprayed in every direction as he emptied his Thompson submachine gun. Just as the last click signaled it was empty, Bill and Tommy joined in, unleashing their own fury. With each muzzle flash, the tide of creatures lessened. The only problem was that more and more replaced the fallen. Having no other choice, the trio began retreating. Soon enough, they found themselves approaching the back of the chamber. Bill, keep firing. Tommy, look for a way out. Frank shouted, his voice cutting through the miasma of death and screeching. Tommy searched wildly, looking for anything that might offer salvation. Then, like a sliver of salvation, he spotted a door. Blue and green light leaked from around the edges, casting a strange hue in the left corner of the chamber. He wasn't the only one to see it. Bill hollered, something between relief and delight, and grabbed Frank, pulling him towards the door. Tommy surged forward, fueled by steely determination. They reached it with no time to spare. Bill pulled hard, and with one mighty yank, bathed them in the otherworldly glow. In an instant, the creatures vanished. It's the light. They don't. Like it, Tommy panted. Let's get inside. Bill stepped inside first, eyes fixed on the source of the shimmering light. At the far end of the new chamber, between two upright supports, stretched something that looked like a mirror. Its surface pulsed with the glow that had saved them. Around this odd mirror, the room was packed full of machines. They weren't machines any of them were familiar with. Strange contraptions that looked like light bulbs the size of milk crates. Moved back and forth on tracks mounted to the walls, yet no light came from them. Huge paneled glass sheets modeled the walls. None of it made sense. Frank pulled the door too, spinning its wheel into the locked position. Fellas, stick close. We don't know what Jerry was doing here. Tommy pulled in close to Frank, yet Bill couldn't stop staring at the mirror. Bill, keep moving. Let's get out of here, Frank said, glancing between Bill and the machines. We've got to go, Sarge, Tommy said, almost like a whine. He said, keep moving. We gotta go. The smell was overwhelming in this chamber. Tommy recalled the first time he helped his pa with the spring harvest. Pigs and cows were skinned and bled, hanging in neat rows in the farm's butcher building. Round back, the gut pit was rank and festering as he dragged a bag of lime over, ready to douse the remains. And yet, this smell was worse. This is the way out, Bill said, moving deliberately towards the glow. Frank and Tommy moved as Bill neared it. There was an odd whirring, humming noise that picked up as he walked closer and closer. The green glow intensified, reflecting off puddles of unknown fluids, and the soft, almost melodic chirping rose again. The machine's hum vibrated through the floorboards beneath their boots. Bill slowed down, Frank warned. This is wrong, so wrong. Bill didn't stop. He extended his hand, reaching for the light. As he made contact, there was a bright flash. Bill! Tommy screamed, lunging, but his hands passed through the air. The simmer engulfed Bill with a wet, tearing sound, dragging him into the green-blue glow. Frank, what on God's green earth was, Tommy said, but was cut off. The creature's shrieking returned. The light. Kid, stay sharp. I'm going to get you out of this place. Think. Did you see any other doors in this room? Frank asked. His face was grim, shadowed with guilt. I think there was one over there. Tommy yelped, pointing to the wall opposite them. Good. Go see if it's unlocked, Frank said as he set a look of determination on his face. Tommy stumbled through the near-pitch dark as he made his way to the door. Behind him, Frank was leaning on the door through which they had come in. Pounding from the other side meant the creatures were somehow replenished. When he got to it, he pulled hard. It gave way a little. He pulled again, and it let go, sending him on his ass, blinded by the light pouring in. By a small mercy, the door had given way to sunshine. Run, kid, don't look back, Frank yelled as his door gave way to the torrent. Tommy saw with sickening clarity as they overwhelmed Frank. He saw one of them jump on his face and force itself into his screaming mouth and down his throat. As the other shredded Frank, it burst from his chest. His open mouth spewed viscera as his head slumped. Tommy stumbled forward into snow and icy cold air as he ran for his life. He was utterly exhausted, but he kept running. The ground began angling downwards to a valley below, and all the strength he had left was used up. Tommy tripped and tumbled down, half rolling, half sliding, until he came to a stop. Just ahead, he saw a large tree. Ice-crusted snow crunched under his hands as he crawled to its base and propped up. Too tired. He was too tired. Tommy O'Hara closed his eyes and drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. Eli, you think anyone made it from B? Said Jack Sullivan, his southern drawl elongating his words past necessity. Dunno, Jack, but it didn't look good back there. Must have been a full platoon that took them out. Yeah, but surely someone made it to cover, Jack replied as he flicked his Zippo and lit a smoke. Jack, buddy, we are patrolling. Smoke will give us away. I'll put it out in A, Jack made to reply, but his eyes landed on something. Holy Lord, look what I found. He half whispered, half coughed. Following his finger, Eli spotted what he saw. Burn that bastard Jack. Jack was fresh. He'd only been in Europe for 2 weeks. Hadn't even had the chance to shoot anybody. He didn't hesitate. Quickly, he lined himself up and aimed at the crowd under the tree. Stupid fucking idiot, taking a nap during war, he said with a chuckle. Just as his gun cracked and the German fell over, a jeep pulled up. Good job, son, said Sergeant Ted Donahue. Filthy rats are everywhere, it seems. Load up. Some boys from C found a bunker back that way, and I want you to smoke it over. You got it, boss, said Jack. He was finally going to see some action. Grandma, why do you always have these creepy dolls everywhere? They look so freaky. all pale white with eyes that look as though they want to conceal the whole soul of what's inside. She's had them for years. They creep me out too much. I can feel their eyes follow me, watching every step that I take. I've answered this question so many times. I've had them ever since I was a little girl. And don't call them creepy. When I was little, every little girl in town wanted one. There's no way people wanted these. It looks like the epitome of a little girl's nightmare. Why not a Barbie? She's beautiful. These dolls are the opposite. She gives me a stern look while adding a frown, not letting a word slip out of her chapped lips. I leave her alone and go to the room that I'll be sleeping in. I love visiting my grandma and getting to accompany her for a couple of days. The only troublesome part is that those pale freaks are in every single room that the house offers. I stare at one of the dolls in my room. I stare into its eyes as I wait. I waited, and waited for something odd to happen. Finally, it winked at me as an evil grin took over its face. It quickly went back to normal. I knew this would happen. That particular doll winked at me before. When I was younger, it made a mess with all of the food on the kitchen counter, framing me for it. All of the times I've been here. These dolls have proved to me over and over again that they're somehow alive. I'm done letting them pretend to be innocent. My hands quickly grabbed the doll that grinned earlier. I grabbed it by the neck. You better start talking or moving around to show me that you're alive. If you don't, you will have a missing head. My hand quickly started to feel deep pain. The spot with the pain also had a bite mark. Oh, is that how you want to be? I immediately removed its head. I then decided to throw the body at the wall. Ow! I feel a sharp knife stab my foot. I look down and immediately see a dozen dolls with knives, forks, etc. trying to stab me. Some even succeeding. I start kicking them, tossing them, punishing, stabbing them with their own silverware, and anything you could imagine. I quickly defeat them all because their bodies are weak. The reason why I overpowered them so quickly was because I wasn't exactly shocked. I knew they were alive and would likely attack me one day. I could easily predict that they were pissed off at me. I've never liked them, and I'm the only one who knows their secret. I will forever have pediophobia because of these haunted, pale as a ghost, dolls.
I'm not sure when the argument started. We'd never fought before all this. Never raised our voices, never laid hands on one another. I do remember our anniversary just as well as she did. The same goes for birthdays. On both sides of the family. I miss those days. I miss when she'd treat me like her equal and not as inferior. Back before the secrecy, before the late nights out, she'd begun coming home from her girl nights in the early morning hours, and, instead of crawling into bed next to me, she'd rush to the shower, careful not to make eye contact with me. It was odd the first time. It was heartbreaking on the 7th. So heartbreaking, in fact, that I did something that I'd sworn wasn't me at the beginning of our relationship. I still feel dirty just thinking about it, but I was distraught. I was confused, and I made a mistake. A little slip in judgment. I went through her phone. I know. I'm awful. I'd forsaken not only my girlfriend, but myself as well. Not only did I not find anything, but her socials were automatically offloaded from her iPhone due to the sheer lack of interaction she'd been having with the apps. Checked her photos, messages, everything. Nothing. One thing that I did find odd, however, was the fact that none of her girl nights had been scheduled. There was no mention of anything about a hangout session in any of her group chats or messages. Feeling ashamed, I put Alicia's phone back where I'd found it while she slept peacefully in my bed. However, the next day, it was as though she knew what I'd done. She never said it outright, but the arguments were brutal that day. It was like every single thing I did set her off, and she was letting me know just how unhappy she was with verbal berations. That would make Eminem flinch. Don't get me wrong, I was cutting quite deep, too. It was actually on this particular day that I decided I wanted us to look into couples therapy. I hated who we were in that moment. I just wanted us back. It took her a few weeks to come around, but I managed to convince her. I think my nostalgic guilt bait finally got to her. It was weird, though. We hadn't really been talking about it much the day that she agreed. At the time, that just told me that she was thinking about me, thinking about our relationship and its betterment. This idea made me smile. even if I knew deep down that it was just a fallacy. She'd arrived home at around 4 in the morning after another night out, but this time she didn't shower. She walked slowly up the stairs, and I could hear that she hadn't yet taken her heels off. At least, I thought I did. When she crept under the covers with me, I could feel her bare feet, but I hadn't heard her stop once to take her shoes off. She lay there with me and, for the first time in a long time, she rested her head on my chest. She rubbed my face in the dark, and together, we lay in silence for a few minutes. I embraced that silence. I wanted this moment to last forever. I ran my hand over her back, petting her softly. She smelled like a forest, like damp pines and moss. I didn't think too much of this and just continued caressing my sweet Alicia. As I said, I wanted this moment to last forever. I didn't want to botch it by questioning her scent. I ran my hand back and forth across her back, and she moaned with relief as I did so. However, as I did this, my hand grazed across something on her back. It felt like her shoulder blade was elongated, as though it had been dislocated and was now hanging off her back like a broken angel wing. As soon as my fingers grazed it, my girlfriend flipped over off of me and plopped down in her spot on the bed. She stared at the ceiling for a few seconds before she finally spoke in a voice like a summer breeze. "I'll do it." I knew exactly what she meant. It was the only thing I'd been pestering her to do. "Really?" I asked, hesitantly. "Just to get you to shut up about it," she replied with a smile in her voice. I looked over towards her, and I could see the outline of her face staring back at me in the darkness. There was a glint in her eye that reflected off the moonlight that peeked through our bedroom window. That detail alone melted my heart, and in that moment, all I wanted was to give her one small kiss. I guess that's what she wanted, too, because before either of us could speak again, she leaned over and pressed her lips firmly against mine. We kissed for a while, borderline making out, but as she shifted in the bed, one of her toenails ripped the skin on my leg open, and I could feel blood immediately begin to trickle. I didn't mean to, but I let out a frustrated shout. "Damn it, Alicia. Good Lord, cut those monsters." I think this embarrassed her, because after a string of "I'm sorries" she rolled out of bed and rushed to the bathroom. I could hear the shower water running, and I assumed she'd be using this time to clip her talons. I was a little annoyed that she hadn't grabbed me a band-aid, but I was more relieved that we'd actually just shared an intimate moment. Rolling out of bed, I had to limp to the light switch. My leg throbbed with pain. When I finally flipped the switch, I was horrified to find that my leg, as well as my sheets, were covered in blood. There was something else in the sheets, too, though. It looked like dirt, soil. We did have a flower bed in front of our porch. Could she have stepped on that before coming inside? These were questions I'd have to put off for now, because my leg felt like it was on fire. It would take a lot more than just a band-aid to cover my wound, and I ended up wrapping it in 3 or 4 layers of gauze before the blood stopped seeping through the fabric. Unable to wash my sheets, I balled them up in a corner of my room while I waited for Alicia to get out of the shower. I didn't want to take her water pressure away. I figured it'd only be around 10 or 15 minutes, but I guess she had other plans. I ended up falling asleep after around the 40-minute mark. When I awoke, I found that my bed was empty. The sheets had been taken from their corner of the room, and I could smell breakfast cooking in the kitchen. When I entered the dining room, I found that Alicia had prepared an entire 3-course meal for the 2 of us. She was finishing up over the stove as she gestured for me to take a seat at the table. That morning, we finally really discussed the therapy. We looked online after breakfast for the options we had available. Unfortunately, the higher-end therapists were out of our budget. That wasn't something I think either of us were worried about, though. I think what we needed was a mediator, not someone to tell us how to feel. After a while, we ended up finding our man, a Native American guy who specialized in couples therapy. We called in and scheduled our appointment, and were due to be seen that Friday. The arguments that week leading up to the appointment were few and far between, mostly small bickering over little things. But there was the occasional screaming match that reminded us why we needed to go to our appointment. Another thing that reminded me, specifically, that we needed this appointment, was the fact that she made me sleep in a separate room from her all week, just so we can miss each other, she'd say. Yeah, right? I'd been missing her for months. I obliged, however, just to keep her happy. Some may see that as me backing down. As a man, I see that as compromise. Every healthy relationship requires compromise, and she'd compromised with me pretty heavily by agreeing to see this therapist. Her showers were especially long this week, too, like she was hiding in the bathroom. On the night before our appointment, she had finally allowed me to sleep in my own bedroom. I guess she had done enough missing me. I was happy, though. It was just fine by me to finally be able to sleep with my arms around her again, no matter how distant she was being. It was the best I'd slept all week. I was disappointed when I woke up alone the next morning, though. No smell of breakfast, no sounds of movement anywhere in the house, just stillness and silence. I called out for Alicia, but received no answer. I went outside to check if her car was gone, and instead found her in the driveway, staring out in the distance with a blank look on her face, her mouth hanging open, lazily, which was weird to say the least. I approached her cautiously and reached to grab her shoulder. The moment my hand made contact, she snapped out of her trance. "What are you doing, weirdo?" were her exact words, like I was the weird one. She huffed past me and went inside to change while I started the car. It was a wordless drive to the counselor's office, but at least we had some road tunes. Still would have preferred some words from my little passenger princess, though. When we pulled into the parking lot, there was only one other car in the lot, and, of course, we had to choose the counselor's office that displayed a neon open sign in the front window. I could already tell that my girlfriend was having second thoughts just from the look on her face. Honestly, she wasn't alone. The place looked interesting to say the least. However, we'd made the appointment, and we were in the parking lot. We had to go through with it, even if I had to drag her through the door by her hand, which, unfortunately, I basically had to do. She seemed like she didn't even want to set foot in the place. Like she could sense something that I couldn't. That tension only increased when she laid eyes on our counselor. I'll admit, he didn't seem the most professional in his white t-shirt and blue jeans, but hey, a counselor's a counselor. My girlfriend seemed distraught, though. It was almost disrespectful how quickly she turned back towards the entrance. The feeling seemed to be almost reciprocated by Dr. Owayak did, though. He sort of just side-eyed Alicia before slowly turning to me, looking paler than he did on his website. He shook his head like he was trying to break away from his current train of thought, before clearing his throat and gesturing us towards his office. We all sat together in awkward silence for the first few minutes while Dr. Owayak stared daggers at my girlfriend. Finally, though, he insisted that Alicia speak first. "Ladies first, I suppose." She went on and on about how she thinks I'm controlling, and how I'm paranoid when I shouldn't be. The doctor listened very intently, nodding along and letting her speak her mind for as long as she needed. If you ask me, I think she was being a bit dramatic. I hate to sound like an asshole, but it just felt like she was nitpicking things that didn't even need discussing. Like she was looking for things to be upset about, because she knew she didn't have things to be upset about, if that makes sense. She finally wore herself out and found herself speechless as the doctor stared at the ground, in deep thought. After a few moments, he said something that I don't think either of us were expecting to hear. "Yes, I see. There is definitely trouble in this relationship. Alicia, do me a favor. Do you think you can step outside while Donovan and I speak privately? I'll do the same for you after our conversation. It's an exercise that has worked wonders for some of my previous patients." Alicia stared blankly. "How long?" she asked, slightly annoyed. "It'll just be a moment," promised the doctor. My girlfriend begrudgingly agreed, and Dr. Owayak held the door for her as she stepped back into the hallway. To my surprise, the moment she was on the other side of the door, the counselor's face dropped into urgent horror as he quickly locked the door behind him. Instead of returning to his desk, he sat directly beside me on the couch, staring me in the eye with a serious glare. "Donovan," he whispered, "that is not your girlfriend." I wanted to laugh at this, but his serious expression made it hard to feel comfortable enough to do so. "Like I know we should break up, kinda way?" I asked, hoping he'd say no. His voice grew more frustrated as he spoke again. "No, you blissful fool. How long did it take you to drive here?" "Ah, geez. Alicia may have been right about you," I replied, rising from my seat. "Doctor." Owayak stood up in a flash and grabbed me by the collar. "How long?" he screamed. I could hear Alicia ask if everything was alright from the other side of the door, as she jiggled the door handle. "I don't know, man. 40 minutes maybe. So, it won't remember the way back?" he asked, his voice returning to a whisper. I'm not sure why I didn't call out for Alicia. Maybe because I was stressed and petrified. Maybe because I wanted to hear what the man had to say. Probably not. "What are you getting at?" The man rushed to his desk and opened a drawer as he answered me. "She can't go home without you. I'm sorry, but I just cannot let you leave with that thing." To my absolute dismay, The item he had pulled from his desk was a 44 caliber revolver, and he spun the cylinder before snapping it closed and tucking it into his waistband. This was the point at which ID had enough. I was not going to stay in this office any longer, and I began calling for Alicia. However, instead of replying to my desperate pleas, the only answer I got was, "Honey, where are the keys?" A stillness fell over the room as the doctor and I exchanged glances. Do you need the keys?" I called out through the door. Her next response caused the doctor to hold up his index finger in a wait motion. "Honey, where are the keys?" she called out again, sounding like a literal broken record. This time, it was the doctor who called out. "Why do you need the keys?" he demanded. The door handle began to jiggle violently. "Honey, where are the keys?" At this point, I was no longer able to think clearly. I now stood directly behind the doctor, afraid to admit that he may have been right. I mean, no human could have been shaking the handle with that kind of force. And it's an honest-to-God miracle that the door didn't break. "Honey, where are the keys?" The voice was growing distorted. It still sounded like my girlfriend, but broken. Like she didn't know what she was supposed to sound like. The doctor slowly removed his revolver from his waistband as Alicia continued. "The keys." Her voice sounded like a growl now. Like she was more demanding the keys than asking for them. "I know what you are," the doctor called out. "You are not welcome here." Suddenly, the rattling of the door handle stopped, and silence filled the room again. The relief was short-lived, however, as the door began warping and flexing as my girlfriend pounded away at the wood. "I will shoot," the doctor screamed. To my horror, voice from the other side of the door changed instantaneously. "I will shoot," it screamed, in a voice identical to that of the doctor. The wood on the door was splintering, and I found myself shaking, praying to God that it wouldn't give. "I will shoot. Where are the keys?" It was as though the doctor and my girlfriend were arguing amongst each other, from within the same body. Without warning, Dr. Owaikta fired a shot into the ceiling. The door stopped rattling, and I could hear what sounded like hose galloping before glass shattered in the lobby. We waited in that room for what felt like hours in complete silence. Finally, Dr. Owaikta poked his head out of the door and looked around. He stepped out into the hallway and gestured for me to do the same. Completely shocked and traumatized, I stepped out on legs that felt like they'd give out from underneath me at any moment. I found that the doctor was examining his door, and, out of sheer morbid curiosity, I did the same. Dozens of hoof prints coated his office door, and his metal door handle had been crushed like a soda can. I stood there in absolute awe at what I was seeing, unsure of what to do. I simply sat down on the tiled floor and let my head fall into my hands as I cried tears of sorrow, shock, and grief. I wasn't sure what had happened, nor what kind of fracture, in reality, I was experiencing. But the doctor briefed me on some of his knowledge. It was all a bit of a blur, but the one word that I can remember crystal clearly was skinwalker. He advised that I wait to go home, give it time instead of giving it the chance to follow me home. I wanted to agree. I wanted to pack up and move to a new city in a new country. However, to do that, I'd have to go home at least one last time. And so that's what I did. It was against the doctor's better judgment. But we waited a few hours with no sign of the thing that pretended to be my girlfriend. I will say, though, the doctor insisted I take something if I insisted on leaving. He left me alone in the lobby while he fetched something from his office. He returned a few moments later, holding a dark black 9mm. "Carry it," he said, "even if it makes you uncomfortable." I graciously accepted his offer, and I drove home that night at an 80-mile-an-hour pace. I didn't want this thing to even have the chance to follow me. I should have just left town. This story would have ended by now if I had. However, I thought that I could outrun it. I thought that it wouldn't be able to keep up, and at the very least would return after a week or so of searching. I could have never guessed that it'd find me the night of. Am writing this now because I can smell the forest. That cool fragrance of pine trees and moss. It's been growing stronger and stronger as I write. However, more importantly, the thing that's destroying me the most and making me truly believe that these are my last moments is the fact that I can hear those heels coming up the stairs. That click-clack hoof sound that I've learned to hate. I can hear it coming up the stairs and, unfortunately, my door is not nearly as strong as the counselor's.